Don't you just hate when you're in an uncomfortable situation and a giant drop of sweat forms on the back of your head? Oh, wait, that only happens in anime. If you are an anime watcher like myself, you've likely seen a plethora of visual gags, as they are such a defining and unique characteristic across various genres of anime. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, why are you making a whole video over a topic that is self explanatory? Well, I'm glad you asked, or at least thought it. Although some things may seem obvious, here's a friendly reminder that not everyone's brain works the same way. So things that might be easier for you to pick up on might be more difficult for somebody else. And for a first time anime watcher, the visual language in anime could be really jarring and confusing. And on the other hand, if you're an anime veteran, you've likely grown so accustomed to the visual language in anime that you don't even give it a second thought anymore. But no matter where you fall on the anime watcher spectrum, some of these visual gags actually have cultural implications that you might be missing out on. So let's take a closer look at the visual gags you've probably seen hundreds of times and uncover what they actually mean. Let's first talk about the role of visual language in anime. In real life, we're able to gauge how someone is feeling based on their behavior, their body language, facial expressions. And although 2D animation is more limited in its capacity to express these things, it still follows the basic idea. So as most of y'all know, anime is usually based off of manga, which relies primarily on art to convey what is happening in the story while utilizing minimal dialogue. As a result, writers incorporate various forms of visual language to show the audience rather than tell them explicitly what the character is thinking or feeling. Now, using visual cues is universal across animation. This is not something that is unique specifically to anime. Think of a light bulb over a character's head to show that they had a bright idea, or stars circling over their head to show you that they're unconscious. Those are just some common ones that we often see represented in Western media. However, anime actually does have its own set of visual cues. The word manpu describes the iconic visual symbols in manga iconography used in Japanese anime and manga to show a character's rapid shift in their emotional state. So now that we've talked about what anime's visual language is, or manpu, and why it's so important, let's now take a look at some of the most common examples that we see. And just a quick note, throughout this video, I will probably refer to the anime visual language as gags or tropes, so don't let my terminology trip you up. Also, my Japanese is elementary at best, so please pardon if I butcher any pronunciations or translations. I did the best I could. Starting off strong with one we all know and love to hate, the iconic nosebleed. Known as hanaji in Japanese, this one is likely pretty obvious that it represents sexual arousal and often occurs after a character sees someone they find attractive or someone in a revealing outfit. It would be pretty difficult for animators to express sexual arousal in a way that is not going to be censored, so thus we get the nosebleed. It is sometimes shown as a simple streak of blood, or it can also be overflowing spouting, causing the character to pass out. While I was researching this video, I saw that it comes from an old Japanese wives' tale that intense passion or excitement can elevate your blood pressure enough to cause a nosebleed, but I did have a hard time confirming this fact, so take it with a grain of salt. Next up, we have one of anime's most enduring manpus, the sweat drop. Known as asemaku, which literally translates to sweat mark or sweat icon. This one is also very obvious, but I would be remiss if I didn't include it in this video because it is one of the OGs. The sweat drop is used to convey nervousness, confusion, embarrassment. It usually appears when a character is wrapped up in an awkward moment, and it highlights the character's internal exasperation at the interaction. Also important to note, the number of sweat drops and also the size shows how severe the character's emotional state is. Coming in with another classic, the cross-popping vein. The anger mark, or ikarimaku, as it's known in Japanese, is used to show when a character is extremely angry, irritated, or outraged. It typically appears on their forehead, their temple, and also sometimes on the back of their hands. So this trope actually is based on a real-world physiological response, though it is heavily exaggerated, when blood vessels bulge due to high blood pressure and tension during moments of rage or stress. Also, fun fact, the cross-popping symbol became so recognizable and ingrained in Japanese society that it actually became the universal emoji for anger. Check your phone. It's real. Moving on to a visual metaphor, we have the arrow to the chest, also known as the harsh word impact. This one occurs after a character is told something hurtful and involves using literal words as symbolic projectiles to show the power of language. There is a Japanese phrase, mune ni sasaru, which means piercing my heart, that is used as a metaphor for when a song, a moment, a memory, a movie hits you with a really sudden rush of truth and resonance. And although I usually see this used in comedic moments, it is a physical representation of the emotional pain when hearing an insult, rejection, or an uncomfortable truth. Now moving on to the lightning glare. This trope is used when two characters make eye contact and a rivalry literally sparks between them, their disdain for one another being very evident. The lightning usually shows the division between the two characters and the atmosphere being charged up with tension. This gag is usually setting up the characters to fight, but I feel like I see it more often in comedic moments rather than an actual display of hostility. Next, let's talk about the blank face gag. And this one can be represented represented in multiple ways. First, there's the shadowed upper face that goes dark or tinted blue as a tool to convey embarrassment, depression, or defeat. Next, there's the blank white eyes, which we see a lot. This signals utter shock and speechlessness, usually following a dumb or ridiculous statement made by another character. Lastly, there's the flat face, which shows facial features being reduced to lines, and this is usually when a character is feeling tired or unimpressed by another character. Now, onto one of my favorite comedic tropes, giving up the ghost. From the Japanese phrase, tamashi ga nukeru, which translates to one's soul leaving the body, this happens when a character is so overwhelmed by shock or a strong emotion that their soul literally gives up and leaves their body. It literally makes me laugh every time, and we usually see this after a character does something so cringeworthy or they make a mistake that they literally want to die of embarrassment. It can also be used when a character suffers like a blow to the head or something like that. Moving on to a more serious one, we have empty eyes, known as utsurome in Japanese, which translates to hollow or vacant eyes, which refers to when a person or a character's pupils are absent from their eyes, which gives them a sort of lifeless look. I have seen this done in primarily two ways. The first being with yandere characters when they reach a mental breaking point and are no longer able to keep up the facade of sanity, so it's used to highlight their true nature. The second and most common use of the empty eyes trope is for characters who have undergone severe trauma, they're in shock, or they have a really dark and troubled past. With these characters, the empty eyes reflect the feeling of emptiness within them and highlights their inability to really feel anything. I really like when this trope is done specifically with characters who have previously throughout the story always been really happy or positive, and then they experience something horrible which changes them. I say I love it because it really is such a realistic representation of trauma, and it's also an easy way for the audience to recognize the internal shift within the character without them explicitly stating how much they are suffering. All right, next is what I'm gonna call dark lurking because it's a newer thing and I couldn't really find the actual word for it. Only a few examples of this actually come to mind, but they always make me laugh, so I thought I would include it. This trope involves a character staring intensely at an interaction they really want to be part of. The dark aura represents their sadness, jealousy, or anxiety over being excluded. I also love that it comes across as kind of creepy because it plays into the idea of being stalked or watched by an ominous figure just lurking in the corner, but it still lands in such a funny way that it makes it one of my favorite tropes. Moving on to background patterns. Now, there are various ways that background patterns are used in anime to show how the characters are thinking or feeling, but I'm just going to cover two of the most common: bubbles and flowers. For the bubbles, it's showing innocence, cuteness, friendship, love, and it's pretty easy to understand. Now, flower patterns actually have their own cultural significance, as Japan has its own flower language. There are various forms of Japanese literature that involve the humanization of plants and the use of them as symbolic. To name just a few, cherry blossoms represent education and fleeting beauty, red roses show bashful shame, and daisies represent innocence and purity. Now, this is a topic I could get very tangential on because it is so interesting to me, but overall, background patterns using flowers usually just convey friendship, love, or a strong positive emotion towards another character. Next up, we have one of the weirder gags, the Bishie Sparkle, and this is a gag reserved for only the most beautiful and charming characters in anime. It gets its name from the word bishonen, which means pretty boy or beautiful youth, and refers to a character or a young man who has more androgynous or feminine features. When this gag is present, the character will suddenly radiate glowing sparkles, light beams, floating diamonds, or flowers, and it's basically the equivalent of aura farming, but just for looks, if that makes sense. Cat fangs, or yeba, which is the Japanese word for double tooth, which refers to kind of a snaggletooth. In anime, the cat fangs are used to show cuteness and mischievousness, but there are cultural origins as well. Many people in Japan associate yeba with a youthful, innocent, or approachable charm rather than a dental flaw. The look became so popular that a lot of young women in Japan would go to dental clinics and get temporary fangs glued onto their teeth so they could achieve this look. Overall, though, cats are mischievous, and so anime uses the cat fangs to show a character who is also mischievous. Lastly, the eyelid pull taunt. Known as akanbe, it is a facial expression of mild disrespect or disdain and is usually used by kids in real life in a taunting manner. In anime, though, it's usually used by cheeky or tsundere characters in a playful, taunting way. I've always been curious about this one, but I was kind of able to connect it to the Western, like, la 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 boo boo thing, but it makes sense that another culture would have their own version of this pretty popular gesture. And there you have it. From nosebleeds and sweat drops to empty eyes and literal lightning bolts, anime has a pretty extensive visual vocabulary to show us exactly what the character is thinking or feeling without having to say a single word. And honestly, I think that's what makes these little visual gags so interesting. Although a lot of them are already funny on the surface, if you dig a little deeper, you start to see how they're connected to Japanese culture, symbolism, and everyday gestures. So next time you see a character with their soul leaving the body or a vein popping out of their head, you'll know there's a little more going on than just funny animation. And if you're an anime veteran, maybe this gave you a reason to look twice at some of those visual gags you probably stopped noticing. And if you're new to anime, hopefully this makes some of the visual language feel just a little less confusing and maybe even fun to recognize, because once you start noticing Monpu, you really can't unsee it. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, maybe leave a like, leave a subscribe, whatever the YouTubers say, and let me know in the comment, what anime visual gag do you see all the time and what's your interpretation of it, whether it's obvious or not. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.